Don't get your hopes up with the whole prepared for weeks. That was a good introduction, but I wanted to say, those of you who do not know me, kind of who I am, who's talking to you. I'm a covenant member here at the Grove. I was here when we were in a living room. I have known God my whole life. I've known Jesus on a deeper level for 4 or 5 years. So I'm excited to be up here. I lead a home group here at the Grove. So some of you may be in my home group, know me from there. Got a lot of friends that come here. I'm also part of the leadership cohort. Most of you may not know about this, but there's a few of us going through a leadership cohort with Zach, just for what he just talked about, to raise up leaders, to help as we grow as a church, to have other leaders in the church to come alongside and fill the spots where we need as we grow as a church. Those of you who do know me may be thinking, why in the world does Adam have a microphone? Typically, Zach gets on edge when I have the microphone, but I promise you, he let me do it this time. He asked me to preach, so that's why I have the mic. I was asked probably a month or two ago, I guess, by Zach. He said he was going to be preaching somewhere else. He was supposed to go preach somewhere else and asked me to preach. And I said I'd like to. I'm real nervous, but I definitely would like to. And as you can see, he's still here, so I'm still not positive that this wasn't some sort of trickery to get me up in front of everybody. There's no facts. I haven't fact-checked this to see if Zach actually did have somewhere to preach. But I'm here, and I am honored. I'm honored to be preaching. I think it was probably a year ago I told Zach, I'm not looking to be a full-time preacher, but I just feel this call in my life to help in that way. And if you ever need someone to preach, you're going to be gone. I want to be prepared to do something like that. So that's why I'm here. I'm actually even more honored that I get to talk about Ruth. If you know me, I've got smoking hot wife, 2 pretty daughters, and women. God decided that I was going to be surrounded by women. I don't know. Some days it's really, really good, and then there's a few other days that's really, really scary, especially when they're all crying at the same time. But Ruth speaks to me just because it's this woman of strong character, this powerful woman of the Bible, one of the few books of the Bible that's named after a woman, and her story is incredible. It's phenomenal. It's this awesome love story, but I won't jump too far ahead. We'll get into that. Honestly, I'm not usually this nervous to talk in front of people. I like to talk. If you know me, you know that. I talk to anybody, even the trees sometimes. But I am nervous this morning. But Brooke, in her super awesome wisdom last night, shared something with me out of 1 Corinthians. And I just want to share it with you guys to know where I'm at, let you know where I'm at. But Paul's talking to the church of Corinth in the first chapter, and he tells them that he hasn't been called to have eloquent words, but to preach the gospel. I promise you I'm not going to have eloquent words all the time this morning. I may look at my notes a lot. I may do weird things with my hands because I still don't know how that works with a face mic. But that's not the point. The point is that the gospel is to be proclaimed, and hopefully that's all that you see this morning and not any weird thing I'm doing. So I do just want to pray real quick for myself and for us as we dig into the Word. So join me in that. God, I'm nervous. I'm excited. God, you, in your providence, brought me here. And I trust that. I trust you. I pray that everybody here can see that and trust you as well. God, in any awkward moments or weird moments, or if I say something that I wish I could take back and put in my mouth this morning, I pray that you'd be seen, you'd be heard. And it's not about me. So I pray that you would step in front of me and be heard, and let the gospel be proclaimed. Amen. All right. So if you have your Bible, turn to Ruth 2. We went through chapter 1 last week, so we're going to be in 2. We're not doing all of 2 this morning, but we started this series on Ruth just to give you kind of where we're at. Ruth is this ultimate love story. You have these 2 unlikely lovebirds that have, they will meet. We didn't find that in chapter 1, but I get to introduce the second part of that romance this morning. It's a story that really puts modern day love stories to shame if you really look into it, because it is all from the sovereignty of God. Something else I enjoy, if you know me, I love sarcasm. And you saw a little bit of that last week. We learned about a place that meant house of bread, where there's nothing to eat. Sarcasm number one. Then we learned about a man whose name meant my God is king, who brought his family to a place where God can't be worshipped or isn't worshipped. And then we learned about two sons whose name meant sick and dying, which is still crazy to me, and then they got sick and died. So a little bit of humor in this. It's just kind of ironic. That speaks to me, but it's not just a romantic story. It's not just an irony story. Really, this story is one that just highlights the providence of God, and that's what we're going to look at mostly. We see in this chapter that life really starts changing for Ruth. Everything's starting to develop for Ruth. I have to say that probably the most encouraging part about this for me personally is I resonated with Elimelech last week. I don't know about you guys, but hearing Elimelech, who is this man of God, who is in the community of people with God, he has distrust that led to bad decisions. He didn't trust that God would take care of his family. I don't know, Brooke will tell you. I hope she doesn't tell you too much, but I do not lead well sometimes. So I resonate with Elimelech, hearing his story. I also resonate with Ruth. She's this undeserving outcast who's still brought into the family of God. And man, all the time I feel like, why? Why God? Like, I don't deserve anything you've given me. So I resonate with that. That's kind of this cool part of the story. If you did miss last week, don't worry. I know you're like, man, I have no clue what he's talking about. Let me recap chapter 1 for you, so we're all caught up. Here's chapter 1 in a nutshell. The story of chapter 1 really revolves around this character, Naomi. So Naomi, she has a husband and two sons. There was a famine, and Elimelech, who is Naomi's husband, Elimelech takes his family to the land of Moab, not trusting God, and where Moabite women, we actually learn that Moabite women, they seduced Israelite men. So Elimelech's taking his two single sons to this place where women who didn't know God, they're known for seducing young men like this. So that's kind of what Elimelech has done. Elimelech dies, and Naomi's two sons have married. They married Moabite women, that's Orpah and Ruth, and here's where we got introduced to Ruth, and then they die. So things aren't going real well for Naomi. Naomi's a widow. She's childless. She has these two Moabite daughter-in-law. She hears that her homeland has food, and she's like, I got to get out of this place. I'm going back to where there's some food and where my people are at. So she decides to move back, but she tells her daughters-in-law, look, don't come with me. It's really for their good. She's trying to look out for Orpah and Ruth because she knows if they go back away from Moab, it's very likely they're not going to have a husband and they're not going to have children. She's trying to look out for them, setting them free, so to speak. Orpah does stay back, but Ruth clings to Naomi. Here's one of the big quotable parts of chapter 1 to remind you of. If you didn't hear it last week, here it is. Ruth, when Naomi tells her to go back, Ruth says, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. So like this big wow moment that we have, and Naomi's so wowed that she doesn't even respond. She has nothing to say to this character of Ruth that says, I'm going with you. Your people are going to be my people. Your God will be my God. At the end of chapter 1, we see them entering Bethlehem, back to their native land. The end of the chapter, it does seem bleak. There's, we did get to see this positive that Ruth said, I'm going to come with you. We do know that there's a harvest coming. Those really are the only two things that's going on in Naomi's life that are at all positive. It's very bleak. It's dark. Ruth has no job, no father, no husband, no income. Doesn't sound real great for Ruth either. But chapter 1 really just sets the scene for this white knight to enter Ruth's life. We can feel it. The tension is built, and here we are. So this is awesome. I got to know this week that Zach was jealous because chapter 2, he loves chapter 2 of Ruth. It's like his favorite part, and I got to steal it in God's providence, though. So I love it. I love it too. So if you're in Ruth chapter 2, let's start in verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. All right, so everything's dark, everything's bleak, we're worried at this point. But the author goes ahead And without any sort of like build up, boom, here he is. Here's Boaz. So we've got this introduction to this dreamboat hunk of a man. So ladies, like, this is Boaz, right? This is the guy who owns property. He's worthy. We just found out he's worthy. He's rich. He's single. This guy's like the wow, okay? Most of you know what I'm talking about here. He's not the type of man who binge watch This Is Us. I'm just saying, like, he's a manly man, all right? Single women. I'm gonna pinpoint you here, but don't worry, I'll get the men right after this. Those of you who desire a relationship, who desire marriage, this is the man I pray that you find. This is the man of character. The world and all the movies you watch, all the TV shows, This Is Us, whatever, it's pointing you to these facade of a man, this wealth, money, fame, fortune. Does he have a nice smile? Does he have six-pack abs? Tan? I don't know. Whatever you guys think. But that's what the world's painting, and that's what the enemy would have us look at, you as women look at. But I want to encourage you, right here is what to look for. Here's your challenge. Women, how often are you captivated by a man's character? How often are you captivated by a man's character? Are you truly attracted to godliness? Zach said it many times. Being attracted to godliness as a single person, that's something you got to pray for. Because we're not. I mean, if you're honest with yourself, we're not. I wasn't. God in His sovereignty let me find Brooke, even though I wasn't. And she's gorgeous, and He gave me a kind of a full package. But we don't look for that. We say godliness is on down the rungs of the ladder. So that's my prayer for you this morning. But also men. I don't want to just pick on women. We can learn from Boaz here. Really look at Boaz. Are you being the person that the person you are looking for, men, is looking for? I know that's real wordy. I'll repeat. Are you being the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? And folks, if you're not, then what are you doing? I mean, if you're bar hopping, if you're going like you think you're going to find your woman at the bar or the club, which we don't have in Spruce Pine, so that may not hit home right here. But are you searching out godly women? And if you are, if that's what you know you need, if God should tell you that, are you being the person that person's attracted to? Are you a man of character? So there's your challenge, both sides of the fence right there. Let's go to verse 2. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." All right, so we see for the first time this word glean. I don't know. I didn't know what glean meant. There's no gleaning going on in Spruce Pine that I know of. So I had to look it up. But in Leviticus 19, 9 through 10, we learn of this welfare program that was set up for the poor. Really, God had a structure, safety net. I think Mark told me this morning we were talking about a safety net for the poor. And this is part of it. Gleaning was set up so that these poor individuals, people less fortunate, could go to a field. The landowner was required in gleaning to allow them to hit the edges and follow behind people who were picking grain and pick up the scraps. They left a trail, so to speak, and left enough for someone to work, to go out in the field to work and give them a fair chance at life. It was an honest way to work to let them survive. So that's what gleaning in, that's what Ruth is going to do. Ruth is willing to put in the work and go and glean. So that's what she does. Verse 3 and 4, verse 3 and 4. So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. All right, so I'm going to repeat that because we're going to hit on it. And she happened to come to a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was a part of the clan of Elimelech. Verse 4, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." All right, so here's my favorite part as I first start reading chapter 2, because the author is obviously using sarcasm. It's being humorous and saying, "It just so happened," or "as luck would have it." This sarcasm is this huge giant arrow pointing to exactly what we talked about last week, the sovereignty of God. We're looking at the sovereignty of God, and the author's like, look, like, you know this just can't so happen, right? Like, just so happened that she's in this field of Boaz, who I just told you is of the clan of Elimelech. Boaz's field, she just so happened, this is all that just so happens. Let me hit on this. He's saying, as luck would have it, it just so happened that she ended up in Boaz's field, who just so happened was wealthy and kind and worthy, who just so happened to be a part of the clan of Elimelech. Let me tell you, nothing, absolutely nothing happens by chance in the economy of God. I hope you know that already this morning, but trust in that. Nothing happens by chance in the economy of God. There's a sovereign God who is at work in our lives. And at times it may seem that there's not, I promise you. You may be in one of those seasons where you don't think it's happening, but I promise you it is. Zach talked about Elimelech last week. We saw Elimelech make some really bad choices. And we talked about last week that God is at work even in those bad choices. He doesn't prefer us to make those bad choices, but he's at work in those bad choices. Everything happens for a reason is what we talked about last week. So, let's see. We've got kids here today. There's no nursery, so let me put this in a way that you're not going to have a long talk when you go home, okay? So, just some personal story of God's providence in my own life. When I was very young, I was introduced to some pretty terrible things on the internet. This horrible, sad act that entered my life, it shaped the way that I looked at women. It affected my character in a big way. And it even went on to damage my future relationships and even almost crushed my marriage. So I acted on lust and immorality and eventually nearly lost my marriage in that. If you're in my home group, you've heard that story. But now I'm zoomed out. And that's what we're talking about with providence of God. You start zooming out and you get further down the road and you see God's hand in all that. So just some things that I've noticed through that part of my life and God, his hand in it. In my poor view of women, I looked at women as a selfish way to fulfill a desire. God brought this wisdom to be a better husband, to be a better father, to look out for teenage boys. I can raise my daughters in a way that I know what they're going through. I know what they're up against and because of my past. So in my battle with what I was dealing with, websites, God allowed me to disciple other men in that same struggle. In our church alone, I have quite a few guys who I'm signed up as their mentor on a website, and anytime they might look at anything they're not supposed to, I get an email. I get to talk to them. I get to tell them my story, tell them how God pulled me through that and how God is better. The gospel can change you. Let's look at that. Let's learn the gospel. Sovereignty of God in that, allowing me to disciple other men. He's opened up plenty of doors at the Grove, God has, through those bad decisions to bring glory to him. I just want to say there's so much power in realizing that. There's power in realizing that God is just so happening the smallest details of your life. So, it's not just my personal story. Look at our church. Honestly, zoom out right now, look at our church. We started in a living room. We had 13 people. Half of those left. We then moved into a building. So we lost people, then decided to move into a building. We prayed constantly, and God just kept bringing people that needed this community. Most of you, all of you that have been coming, that are sitting here, and most of you who just started coming, there's probably something that may have been said or a person that you met that God has there for that reason at that time. We started in a living room, we moved into a bar, now we're in an outdoor pavilion at the gorgeous Baird Inn, and we have a new building on the way. All of that is by the hand of God. You can see it in our church. Our lives and everything going on around us is a part of just what just so happened in the providence of God. That should be comforting. The omnipresent God, and those of you, I didn't know what omnipresent meant at all until a year ago, so if you don't, let me tell you, omnipresent God, he was there when the earth was created. Before that, he's here right now. He's going to be here. He's already in the future. He knows everything that has happened and will happen. Rest in that. He knows. It's like a parent. Those of you who are parents, me and Brooke can follow the girls around the house and literally see you're about to get hurt. I know when you dance on the side of the trampoline outside the net, you will fall off. It's not you might fall off. You're going to. I'm not saying I have the providence of God, but I fell off the trampoline. Mom and Dad are here this morning. They can tell you I was off the trampoline more than I was on it. I know it's going to happen. But God's been there, and he even knew, unlike me and Brooke, that they might fall off. God knew that you were going to fall off. So why not rest in that? I mean, we're like children that can just rest in the fact that our God, the God that we follow, has seen everything that's going to happen in our life. All right, let's jump to verse 5. Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" All right, it's a cool verse. I'll pause. Just one verse, very short. Boaz gets his first glimpse of Ruth. He's like, OMG. Who is this PYT right here? Pretty young thing, if anybody doesn't know the abbreviation. So he sees Ruth. She's out in the field. She's working hard. I mean, most of you might think, like, she's probably a sweaty mess, but he didn't see that. He's seeing, like, who is this woman? So we see, like, things have started to happen. Ruth came from Moab. She's with Naomi. She just so happened to be in the field, who just so happened to be gleaning, just so happened to be taken care of by God, who just so happened to show up in Boaz's field, who, just so happened to show up that day. And then boom, he's like, who is this? So, I mean, I'll pause for a second. Men, around the holidays, there's this not so glorious thing, Hallmark holiday movies. Anybody, like, you get stuck watching those with your wife, like, you know what I'm talking about. These Hallmark holiday movies, maybe Lifetime movies, maybe that hits home more for some of you. I sit there and I'm watching with my wife and I'm like, come on, like, that's cheesy. That's real cheesy, right? Like, how cheesy, you're asking, right? 2006, this company named Glambia, stick with me here. They opened the largest cheese plant in the world, this remote corner of New Mexico. There was a joint venture, $190 million project, that they're going to produce 113 million kilograms of cheese a day. A truckload of cheese leaving this factory every hour. And I'm telling you, these Hallmark movies have more cheese than this. Like, this is the cheese. Like, I'm looking at Brooke like, oh, really? Like, come on. But seriously, like, as cheesy as the movies are, that's this story. Like, all that just so happened. You would have to, if this was like one of the movies, they made Ruth the Lifetime movie, like, you would do the same thing. Like, that doesn't happen that way. Like, it's not this pretty. Like, that can't be what's going on. But we see all these little cheesy things happen in this super unrealistic meetup, the two main characters, and all we can think is like, that never happens. But it's happening. It just so happens. And Boaz is like, dang, girl. Like, there she is. Verse 6 and 7. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she's a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came, and she continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. So this is what Boaz's main dude in the field says about Ruth. She came, she asked if she could glean in the field. She didn't demand it. She didn't say it's my right. She continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. So he's telling her, like, she's working hard, dude. Like, this woman is humble. She's working. And he's even filled in, at some point, we hear later that he's filled in about the relationship with the mother-in-law and how kind she's been. So Boaz gets this picture painted for him. And this is what the text is telling us about Ruth through this worker. She's devoted to taking care of Naomi through whatever means necessary. We see her humility. He saw her humility, so we see her humility. She doesn't demand a handout. She doesn't presume that I have the right to glean, which she did, but she doesn't presume that. And she wants to gather up leftovers. So we see her work ethic, where they say she continued from early morning until now, and she hasn't even stopped for rest. So we see her work ethic. Like, the older I've gotten, being young and naive, like, first glance at Brooke, I'm like, whoo, smoking. But then, like, as we progressed, you start seeing these things. Like, don't get me wrong. I've got a beautiful wife, but her character, her devotion to me and the girls, she lays down what she wants and needs continuously just to help the girls and I survive, literally survive most of the time. Now I look and I see her godliness and I'm like, golly, like, When she told me the scripture when I was nervous last night, man, that's better than anything. So like, this is what we're seeing, the picture painted for Ruth. I want Holland and Luca to do. I want them to read this and see that. Holland and Luca, my daughters, I want them to see this character and be so satisfied in living for God, working hard, being a woman with this moral, godly character, and their future husband, if that's God's will for them, sees that and finds that attractive. Cool picture of what they're seeing in Ruth. Verse 8 and 9, then Boaz said to Ruth. So Boaz approaches, he said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one. Big point, I'll break down that later, so I'll read it again. Now, listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessel and drink what the young men have drawn. All right, so we see this awesome Old Testament pickup line from Boaz. He's like, girl, don't go glean nowhere else. Don't leave this field, girl. I mean, it might not hit with us because most of us guys aren't like, this isn't the meetup we've got, but this is what's happening. He's approaching her. He says, my daughter. May seem kind of weird, but in the times, he's doing this to show respect. He's also saying it this way to show grace to her and compassion. One of the main focuses of this section, Boaz is telling her, this is the place you need to be. This is the place that you need to be. I have made arrangements for you to be here, to be safe here, to give you a new and better life here. And really, doesn't God call us in the same way? Such an awesome statement by Boaz that I think God is calling to us all the time. Stay in the field. So he connects her to other women in the field. He's trying to get her a group. He's trying to get her connected. You know, you would feel good starting a new job and they're getting you a nice introduction to all these people. But he also ordered these young men not to harass her. In those times, it was very common for a foreigner to be taken advantage of, or at least spoken to harshly by these young men in the field. So Boaz is setting the tone. He's like, look, this one right here, you touch or you die, you know? Like, he's like, nothing. So Boaz has that protection automatically by Ruth has that protection by what Boaz is saying for her and to her. He's shockingly crossing so many cultural lines. We can't feel that as much right now because it's different. But at the time, this is crossing every line. And Boaz doesn't even care. He's saying everything he's saying to her with confidence. And in that culture, women would typically go get water for men. And this is a big cultural line. He's saying, no, like you're drinking what the guys are drinking. So we just see all of this just shows us where Boaz is at, what he wants to do just to protect her and take her under his wing. Verse 10. This is Ruth's response. Then she fell on her face, bowing on the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? It's a huge response, humble response. Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? So this line from Ruth is setting up this beautiful poetic dialogue. This is what Zach's going to keep breaking down in the weeks to come. That these two, just beautiful. It's romantic. This is why we call it a romance story. The way that they're just interacting and talking to each other is awesome. I mean, it is evident that we look at Ruth and she questions it. I mean, most of you women know, like, when a guy's coming on this strong, like, I'm going to question that a little bit, right? That's what she's doing. She's setting up this kind of barrier right at first, and she's like, why are you being so nice? Like, what's your intentions? Are you looking for a fling in the field? Like, come on, you looking for a fling in the field? But she's really, I mean, then you see, like, she's blown away by this mercy. She does, like, how can you understand this type of mercy? She's on the ground in humble disbelief. So by her body language and what she's saying, you know she's just blown away. My opinion is that Ruth, right here, you know, in chapter 1, we saw her say, your God's going to be my God. So she has chosen to follow Naomi's God. She's doing what she believes is right. But at this point, I think she's starting to see what we're seeing. She's believing that God, this God that she swore to be her God, she's believing in the sovereignty in her life. She's starting to see that it just so happens. She's starting to think this isn't luck. So things are unraveling here. Not unraveling, it's kind of a negative terminology. Things are kind of unpacking here for Ruth. Things are coming up and she's seeing what's going on, what God's doing. Verse 11, 12, 13. I'll go ahead and pack those in together right here at the end. But Boaz answered, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me. So we know now, like, that worker probably filled him in on what all she's done for her mother-in-law, how you left your father and mother of your native land and came to people that you did not know before. So this is what he says. He knows what you've done, and this is now what Boaz says to her. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So he prays this prayer over her. He's praying that everything that she has given would be repaid. Not just a little bit, but fully repaid. And that she would be under the wing of God. And then she says, verse 13, then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not of your servant, one of your servants. So a few things. We'll unpack a few things in the last three here. One, Boaz heard and recognizes what Ruth has done. He sees that she has stood by Naomi in the worst of times. He knows her character fully, and he's saying that right off the bat. Then we see this prayer that Boaz has for Ruth. Probably, honestly, one of the coolest things, I think, from this section that I'm talking about this morning. He's praying that she get the full reward and that she be protected by God's wings. But the interesting thing that I want us to look at in this prayer is Boaz here is praying the prayer that he's going to be the answer to. I mean, like, that's, let me unpack that. Boaz is praying a prayer that he's going to be the answer to. Think about it in your own life. Who is it that you could be the answer to the prayer for? Right now. I mean, we talked about in the intro, like, a lot of us feel like disconnected. We've done some things wrong, and there's people hurting. There's people mad. There's people broken. There's a lot of opportunity right now to be the answer to the prayer that you probably are praying for somebody. I think it's easy a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this just as much as anybody else. You see somebody in the church. I got Kyler's approval on this, so don't freak out. Kyler, I see it, just for an example, because I know Kyler. Let's say he's just hurting. Like, I can see, like, something's going on in Kyler's life, and he's hurting. And I'm like, I see it from across the room, never really go up to him, but I'm like, I'm going to pray for Kyler. I know something's wrong. Like, you feel like I'm smart. Like, I can see that something's wrong. Go home, you pray, you're like, Lord, like, Kyler just seems so down. I pray that you would just encourage him and lift him up. I mean, it's not a bad prayer, right? Like, I hope that people are praying that for me. Like, I hope that you're praying that right now for me. But at the same time, like, isn't it very possible that God put that person on your heart to not only pray for him, but then go be the answer? Go to Kyler. Say, man, I know you're down. Like, what is it that I can do? What is it that I could do to help cheer you up? You want to get like some shaved ice and play some putt-putt or something? Like, let's talk about it. Like, how easy is that? Just to approach the person and say, I can tell you're down. Like, what is it I can do to help you? And boom, you're Boaz. Like, the scripture's showing us right here that Boaz is praying this prayer, and God's going to make him be the answer to the prayer anyway. So think about that. Really think about who is it in your life right now. Write their name down. Say, that's what I'm going to do. I've been praying for them, but now I'm going to act. I'm going to see if there's something that I can do for that person. Last thing to unpack that I really think is important in this part right here. I teach the kids classes at the Grove, so kids are a lot easier to talk to, I think. I am one of them, so I understand them. Brooke will attest to that. I am one of the kids. But what we try to do, what we're passionate about in not just the kids ministry, but every part of everything we teach is where's the gospel? The gospel is in every part of our life. It's in kids ministry. It's in every chapter of the Bible leading up. So let's look for the gospel here. Even though the whole chapter makes it very clear that Ruth's an outcast, she's a Moabite, it still looks like she's a part of Boaz's family. So we're at a point now, it looks like she's just part of the family. She gets to eat at the table. He's serving her. She's walking home with grain from his field. So Jesus showed love and grace to us, even though we were sinners and outcasts. Jesus is seeking the outcast as if they were his own family. He shelters the weak under his wings. Jesus cares for the weak and the poor. Jesus serves the hungry at his table. And really very few of us know what it's like to be without food, not knowing where the next meal's coming from. Luckily, and we're blessed with that. But Ruth is not only eating but she's eating at the table and being served by the master of the house. That's the gospel. Jesus showers the needy with grace, and that's what Boaz is doing here. We see in Boaz how the gospel affects that we show love. So Boaz is showing us how the gospel affects the way we show love. Ruth is showing how the gospel affects the way that we receive love. So these two characters are showing us a lot. I'm telling you, there's a ton in here, but this is what I want to hit on. When we look at Boaz and the way that the gospel's affected him, and the way that he is showering someone with grace and giving love and grace, does the world, everybody around us at the Grove, does everybody around us look at the Grove and say, man, God really cares for the needy? And if we start looking at it that way, it gives us a whole new motivation for why we're doing what we do, why we care for people. In our church alone, we're blessed. There's literally, if you tallied up all the houses, cars, whatever, there's millions and millions of dollars. And we've been blessed with it. We're blessed people. But meanwhile, I think the world average is people live on $2 a day. There's people in the world living on $2 a day. But don't even think about like across the world. Like think in our community. How can we impact and care for the needy in our community? A few statistics. Throw these at you. Feeding America study released in 2019 said 5.5 million, which is 7.7% of seniors in the U.S. are food insecure. Don't know where the food's going to come from next. They're insecure in that. In North Carolina, in our state, that number jumps to 10.5%. 10.5% of the state. We've got food insecure seniors. In 2018, a study of the state's 100 counties, when it comes to food security among children, we look at Yancey County, they came in 88, Mitchell 85. That's not on the good end of it. Right here in our community, we see a need to feed. North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services shows that thousands of children in West North Carolina are living in poverty, in unstable housing situations, and without enough food to eat. The opportunities here in our backyard. That's all I want to say with those stats. Like we can serve, and that's what the church is trying to do. Like here are some ways that you're already involved, the church is already involved, in ways you can get involved. The church, from the very beginning, we said, we are going to give 25% of anything that comes in back. Missions, gifts, and church planning. A large portion of that goes to local missions, local gifts, to try to bless those in need. So if you already given, boom, here you are. You're already on a checklist. You're doing some things to help the needy. If you're not given, here's your challenge. I encourage you to start doing that. Just whatever God has blessed you with, give back to other people. And you can do that just through giving to the church. But you don't have to do that. Zach and I got introduced to an awesome group called Neighbors Feeding Neighbors this year. A local organization. They're just focused on feeding people. You can volunteer for them. You can give to them. You can be introduced to them and help them deliver food to people in need. And the church has been given to them as well. Probably the most impactful in the way that you can really like get plugged into giving to the needy is just getting in a home group. I know we harp on home groups all the time, but we started last year home groups mission projects. And you join a home group. As a home group, you have a budget. You get to say, where's a need in the community? You put your budget towards the need in the community. As a group, you're going and helping those less fortunate or however you want to do your missions. Just to give you some examples of what people have done, some home groups have done. We gave out quarters at a laundromat. We really just got like $60 worth of quarters. I think it ended up being 100 because we had to go get more quarters. and just, as I say, bless the piss out of people. Just give them quarters so they don't have to buy their own laundry. And we cooked lunch for them. Joe fired up the grill, fed everybody that came through, gave them food, and they didn't have to pay for laundry that week. And some of them brought like 6 weeks worth. But that was fine. That's what we wanted. Another home group saw that a window was broke out in a car. They drove by our local restaurant enough times, and this window has just stayed broken with a trash bag in it. They just went and tried to find the people and said, like, look, we want to pay for your window. Simple things. I mean, think about how that blesses somebody who probably couldn't afford to change their window. Another thing that we've done is just as a group during this COVID pandemic is we partnered with a restaurant and just went and gave out food. There was a local mobile home park and apartment complex that just had lower income families and handed out food. So just, I mean, this is what I want you guys to think about. Is the local community looking at the Grove and the people of the Grove and saying, God cares for the needy? All right, last few points here. Not only does the gospel affect the way that we show love, like we've seen in Boaz, but it affects the way that we receive that love through Ruth. Ruth, coming from a foreign land as an outcast, is brought into the family of God's people and then becomes a part of a greater mission. So, if you know kind of some genealogy in the Bible, you know kind of some family trees, Ruth goes on to be a great-grandmother to David. It's awesome in itself, but David is in the line of Jesus. Jesus comes from David's line. So Ruth, right here, Moabite woman, land that didn't worship God, says, your God will be my God. Everything just so happens. And Jesus. Like, think about this. Like, this is what we're stepping into in God's sovereignty. Just for like most of you who know me say, just think about God's sovereignty and what's happening right now. Like, as scary as it is, I got a podium and a mic. Like, Zach knows 5 years ago where I was at. And never in a million years. Like, I wanted to help with the church. I wanted to change my life, and I wanted the gospel to change my life. But to be in front of you and talking about Ruth, it's a God thing. Like, there is nothing like as luck would have it, it just so happened in the fact that God changed my entire life, redeemed my marriage, redeemed my understanding of the gospel, and turned my life around. It's happening right here in front of you, I promise you. Ruth isn't like most of us today. We're talking about the way that we receive love through Ruth. We see that. We expect kindness. Like, we expect somebody to be nice. And when they're not, we're resentful, and we think that we have the right. But if you look at Ruth, she's just expressing her unworthiness. And that's the way the gospel changes you. When the gospel changes you, if somebody doesn't do what you thought was right, instead of being hurt at the person, you're like, I was unworthy anyway, you know? God did this all for me anyway. Grace isn't intended to pull us out of lowliness. Grace isn't intended to pull us out of lowliness. It's intended to make us happy in God. I mean, that's what we learn from Ruth here. Grace is not intended to pull us from lowliness. It's intended to make us happy in God, no matter what anybody else is doing around us or how they react to us. So I want to tell you this morning to stay in the field. Stay in the field where God has you. Stay in the field where you're taken care of. Don't run to the field of materialism, to success, to pornography, to addiction. Don't run to those fields. During Corona, some of us may have not had the ability to be physically in the field with our people. But we didn't have to leave the field spiritually. And some of us have. Some of us left God's field spiritually. So come back. Only this field will satisfy. And if you've wandered from the field, or maybe you've never been in the field, please come to the field. So just like the sovereignty of God that's shown in Ruth, think about this morning. Maybe God has you right here, right now, this morning, listening to a person who's preaching for the first time. And just maybe it just so happened that you're here so you can rest in God's providence. That you can rest in God's very specific and sovereign purpose in His mission for your life. The bigger mission and the way you carry that out in your life. You can rest in the love and grace that he gives, because it's okay to not be okay. It's not okay to stay that way. Okay? I'll say that. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. So, let the gospel change the way you give love and grace to other people. Stop having conditional love with people in your life where you so easily get mad if they don't meet your expectations, and start giving grace that Jesus gives you. For the sake of your relationships, for the sake of your friendships, and most importantly, to show Christ to the world. So, as we close, I'm going to pray. I'll pray for us, and we'll sing 2 songs together. And you can pray during this time. But if you're hearing for this story and you want to be like Boaz, if Boaz is speaking to you this morning in his story, and you want to let the gospel affect the way you show love, I encourage you to go find someone. While we're worshiping, right after service, whatever, go find someone. Go to them and pray with them and respond to what you've heard. And maybe be the answer to the prayer you're praying for them. Or maybe you just need to be like Ruth. Maybe you just need to come to the field and rest under God's wings. Bow down before God while we're worshiping. Just humbly go before God, like Ruth did to Boaz, and just say, like, why? Tell God, I'm so hopeless. I'm a foreigner. I don't belong here. Just ask him, why are you being so kind? Let God humble you like he has with Ruth. During this time of worship, pray that God would help. I pray that God would help to encourage you to stop going to other fields. Stop going to the other fields that the world provides. And like Paul prays, there's a starting point. And like Paul prays, just go to God and say, God, I believe you, but help my unbelief. I know you can. I believe you can. I just don't have enough belief yet. God, help my unbelief. Start there. Good starting point. And just see what God does in your life. So, I did decent. I was hoping for like 2 hours to set a record or something. But I'm going to pray for us. Sawyer's going to sing 2 songs for us. And I just ask that you respond during this time. Father God, I am amazed by you. God, your providence all the time just does amazing things. We're taking a Moabite woman, and her family tree leads to Jesus, who saves the world. God, I believe that everyone here is here this morning for a purpose, not for me to be seen, not for me to be heard, but for the gospel to affect the way they go back into this community, back into their family, back into their friendships, and let the gospel affect the way that not only they show love, but receive love. God, I pray that you would just take Ruth the rest of the time that we go through Ruth and study Ruth. God, thousands of years ago, you had this story that today is still showing us the gospel. So I pray as we go through it, that you would open up our hearts, you would give us wisdom and understanding. God, that you would convict us. The things that we just refuse to let go of, the people we refuse to forgive, the situations in life that we choose to be mad at. God, let Ruth's story, her humble brokenness, affect the way that we change our lives right now. And God, I pray that you would just be with us as we worship together. I thank you, God, for bringing me here. I thank you for giving me a message of the gospel to say. In your name I pray. Amen.